I watched my best friend kiss my fated mate at the altar, and I couldn't even scream because the silencing curse she'd placed on me 3 days earlier made sure of that. Cassia, sweet, innocent Cassia, had smiled at me over Marcus's shoulder as their lips met, and in that smile I saw the truth I'd been too blind to see for 23 years. She'd wanted everything I had since we were children, and now she'd finally taken the one thing that mattered. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart, drop a comment right now and tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to shake you to your core, and you'll need to hear how this ends. Hit that subscribe button because this story gets darker before the dawn breaks. And trust me when I say the twist that comes will leave you speechless. The silencing curse would wear off in 6 hours. 6 hours too late. By then, Marcus would be bound to Cassia by ancient laws even I couldn't break, and I, Aurelia Corvina, daughter of the Northern Pax Beta, would be nothing but a footnote in their love story. The girl who introduced them. The friend who stood aside. Except I hadn't stood aside. I'd been shoved. Let me take you back 3 months, to the night everything started to crumble, because you need to understand how deep this betrayal ran. You need to see how carefully she planned every single step. The Harvest Moon Festival was the most important night of the year for our pack. It was when the Alpha's son, Marcus Aurelius, would announce his chosen mate before the entire realm. Everyone knew it would be me. We'd been inseparable since we were 14. He'd told me under the old oak tree when we were 17 that I was his forever. He'd traced the mate mark on my wrist, the silver crescent that only I could see, that only appeared when true mates touched, and promised me a future I'd stopped questioning. Marcus had been my world. He was everything the stories said an Alpha's son should be. Strong, just, protective. But more than that, he was kind. He'd stayed up with me the night my father died, just holding me while I cried. He'd taught me to fight when other wolves said females shouldn't learn combat. He'd defended me against pack members who thought a beta's daughter wasn't worthy of their future alpha. We'd planned our entire lives together. How many children we'd have, 3 we'd decided. What we'd name them. How we'd rule the pack as partners, not as alpha and subordinate. He'd promised me equality in a world that rarely gave it to women. Cassia knew all of this. She'd been there for every moment, every secret, every dream. She was the sister I'd never had, the one person I trusted even more than I trusted Marcus. She'd helped me choose the dress I'd wear to the festival. A deep emerald gown that made my red hair look like fire. "You'll take his breath away," she'd said, adjusting the silver clasp at my throat. Her own dress was simple, cream-colored, modest. "He won't be able to take his eyes off you, Aurelia. This is your night. Your destiny." She'd hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I'm so happy for you," she'd whispered. "You deserve everything beautiful in this world." I'd believed her. God's help me, I'd believed every word. But when I arrived at the festival, Marcus wasn't looking at me at all. He was staring at Cassia. It changed. The cream dress was gone, replaced by an emerald gown identical to mine, but somehow on her it looked different. Her dark hair was arranged exactly like I'd planned to wear mine, in the traditional mating ceremony style with silver pins and white ribbons. She'd even found a silver clasp like the one she'd helped me choose. But there was something else, something in the air around her that made people turn, made them stare, made even the Alpha himself pause mid-sentence when she walked past. "Glamour spell," my mother hissed in my ear, her fingers digging into my arm. "Someone's put a glamour on that girl. Powerful one. Aurelia, we need to." But it was too late. Marcus was already walking toward her. His eyes glazed with something that wasn't quite love but wasn't quite control either. It was in between. That's what made it so perfect, so undetectable. Real enough that he believed it. False enough that it could be crafted. I tried to run to him to break whatever spell she'd woven, but my feet wouldn't move. When I looked down, I saw the symbols drawn in ash around my shoes. Binding runes. Ancient ones. Cassia had drawn them when she'd knelt to fix my hem before I left my room, when she'd fussed over me like the caring friend she'd pretended to be for over 2 decades. All I could do was watch as he took her hand. As he smiled at her the way he'd always smiled at me, that soft, private smile that said I was his whole world. As he announced to the entire pack that Cassia Valentina was his chosen mate. The crowd erupted in confusion. Everyone knew about Marcus and me. We'd been inseparable for 9 years. The pack had been preparing for our mating ceremony for months. His mother had already started planning the coronation that would follow. But when the alpha looked at his son, really looked at him, he saw what he wanted to see. His heir happy, his heir choosing. And isn't that what every father wants? He didn't question it. He didn't investigate the sudden change of heart. He simply nodded, his face showing relief that his son had finally made a choice, and declared the courtship official. I finally broke free of the binding runes an hour later, but by then Cassia and Marcus had disappeared into the gardens, our gardens where he'd first kissed me under the moonlight. When I found them, he was holding her face in his hands, telling her things he'd once told me. Word for word. The same promises, the same declarations. It was like watching someone puppet my life. The mate mark on my wrist burned like acid. I looked down and saw it pulsing, angry red instead of silver. It was trying to reach for him, trying to remind him of our bond, but something was blocking it. "Marcus," I managed to whisper, my voice breaking. He turned, and for just a second, one beautiful, painful second, I saw recognition in his eyes. I saw confusion. I saw him start to remember. But then Cassia touched his arm, her fingers moving in a subtle pattern I recognized too late as a reinforcement sigil, and the fog rolled back in thicker than before. "Aurelia," he said, his voice polite but distant, like I was a casual acquaintance instead of the person who knew every scar on his body, every fear in his heart. "I'm glad you're here. I wanted you to be the first to know. Cassia and I are getting married. Next month. It would mean everything to us if you'd stand with us. You've been such a good friend to both of us." The world tilted. The forest spun. "Married. Marcus, it's me. It's Aurelia. Mate. You know we're mates. Look at your wrist. Look at mine." Cassia's face arranged itself into perfect sympathy, and I realized I was seeing her true talent for the first time. She was a master manipulator, and she'd been practicing on me for years. "Oh, Aurelia. I know this is hard for you. You've had feelings for Marcus for so long. We both know it. But he's chosen me now. You have to respect that. You have to let him go." "Feelings." The word came out like broken glass. "Marcus, show her your wrist. Show her the mark. You know it's there. You've traced it 1,000 times." He pulled back his sleeve slowly, confusion crossing his face. His wrist was blank. Smooth, unmarked skin where the silver crescent should have been. Mine still bore the mark. But his was gone, or hidden under magic so dark I couldn't begin to comprehend its power. "I think you should go," Cassia said softly, but there was steel underneath the silk. "You're making a scene. You're embarrassing yourself. Marcus doesn't feel the same way about you, Aurelia. I'm sorry, but you have to accept that." And I was making a scene. People were gathering, watching the beta's daughter fall apart. Watching me become the villain in a story I hadn't written. I could hear the whispers starting. Obsessed. Delusional. Can't accept rejection. Cassia had orchestrated it perfectly. I went to the pack elders the next day. I told them everything. The glamour, the binding runes, the erased mate mark, the way Marcus's eyes had glazed when he looked at her. I brought my mother as witness. I showed them the mate mark on my wrist that still pulsed with silver light. They listened with grave faces and promised to investigate. Elder Titus, who'd known me since I was born, squeezed my hand. "We'll get to the bottom of this, child. If there's been magical interference, we'll find it." But 3 days before the wedding, Elder Titus came to my home with sympathetic eyes and devastating news. "We found no evidence of magical interference," he said, and I could see he didn't believe his own words. Something in his eyes was wrong. Flat. "We tested Cassia Valentina thoroughly. He's clean. And Marcus. His memories are his own, Aurelia. Whatever you thought you had with him, perhaps it was only ever in your heart. That's impossible. You know it's impossible. Titus, you were there when he declared me his mate 2 years ago. You blessed our bond. I remember no such thing. His voice was monotone now, reciting words that had been planted. You're a fine young woman, Aurelia, but sometimes we see what we want to see. The heart plays tricks. They'd gotten to him. Somehow, Cassia had gotten to all of them. I realized with creeping horror that her magic was more extensive than I'd thought. She hadn't just enchanted Marcus. She'd been weaving spells through the pack for months, maybe years, preparing for this moment. That night she came to my room. The sweet mask was gone, and I was finally seeing the real Cassia. You should have just let him go, she said, perching on my window seat like we'd done 1,000 times before, sharing secrets and dreams. When I first started planning this, I thought you'd be easier to dispose of. But you had to fight. You had to tell everyone. So now I have to make sure you can't ruin my wedding day. Why? The word was barely a breath, my entire world collapsing. Cassia, we were friends. We were sisters. I loved you. I trusted you with everything. You were the princess, and I was the shadow. Her voice was cold now, stripped of all pretense, showing me the woman who'd been hiding behind the mask of friendship. Everything came easy to you. The beta's daughter. Beautiful, powerful, beloved. The heir to the second most important position in the pack. And me. I was just the orphan girl you took pity on. Do you know what it's like to live in someone's shadow for your entire life? To watch everyone love them while you're just there? Just the friend. Just the extra. Never the chosen one. I never made you feel. You didn't have to. Your existence did that. Every time someone praised you, every time Marcus looked at you like you hung the moon, every time the pack talked about what a perfect Luna you'd be, it was a knife in my heart. I wanted what you had. I wanted to be you. And when I realized I could never be you, I decided to take everything from you instead. She stood, pulling a small vial from her pocket. The liquid inside was black as midnight, swirling with something that looked alive. This is a silencing curse. Very old magic. Very dark. The kind of thing that costs pieces of your soul to create. It'll take your voice for exactly 6 hours. Just long enough for me to say, I do. And by the time you can speak again, there's nothing you can say that will matter. He'll be bound to me by laws even you can't break. The mating bond will be complete, and you'll be nothing but a bad memory. Cassia, please. I tried to back away, but my room had been warded. She'd planned this too. She threw the potion in my face before I could finish. The liquid burned down my throat like acid and ice combined, and then nothing. My voice was just gone. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Not a whisper, not a breath, nothing. Perfect, she said, examining me like I was an insect. You know, I almost feel bad. We did have some good times. But you had something I wanted more than friendship. And in this world, Aurelia, you take what you can get. The strong survive. You taught me that, actually, all those years ago when you told me to stop being weak and stand up for myself. I'm just following your advice. She left me there, voiceless and trapped, and I spent the next 3 days in a special kind of hell. I tried everything. I wrote messages, but people dismissed them as the ravings of a jealous girl. I tried to show people the mate mark, but under Cassia's magic, they couldn't see it anymore. Only I could. A reminder of what I'd lost, pulsing on my wrist like a second heartbeat. My mother tried to help. She went to other packs seeking aid, but by the time anyone could arrive, the wedding would be over. She held me while I cried silent tears, and I saw my own helplessness reflected in her eyes. So I stood at that wedding, voiceless and powerless, and watched my best friend marry my mate. The ceremony was beautiful. She'd made sure of that. Every detail was perfect, from the white roses, my favorite flower that she'd always claimed to hate, to the ancient vows spoken under the full moon. She wore a dress that was almost identical to the one I'd sketched in my journal, the one I'd dreamed of wearing when I married Marcus. She'd stolen even that. Marcus looked happy, or what passed for happy under her spell. There was an emptiness behind his eyes, a hollowness that no one else seemed to notice. But I saw it. I saw my mate trapped inside a prison of magic, and I couldn't save him. When the priestess pronounced them bound for life, I felt something inside me shatter so completely I wasn't sure I'd ever be whole again. The mate mark on my wrist turned black, still visible to me but now pulsing with pain instead of warmth. A bond interrupted. A destiny stolen. The 6 hours passed. My voice returned during the reception, right as they cut the cake. Another detail she'd stolen from me. I told her once about the 3-tiered honey cake I wanted at my wedding. But what could I say? It was done. Marcus was bound to her by ancient laws, by magic and vow and consummation rites. Speaking now would just make me look more pathetic. I left that night. I couldn't stay in a pack where my mate was married to someone else, where everyone looked at me with pity or contempt, where Cassia's victory was complete and my humiliation was public entertainment. My mother begged me to stay. We'll fight this. We'll find a way. But I was broken in a way that couldn't be fixed by staying. I needed to leave. I needed to become someone new. I went to the Eastern Territories, to the wild lands where wolves ran without packs and questions weren't asked. It was harsh there, lawless, dangerous. Perfect for someone who had nothing left to lose. I spent 5 years there. 5 years learning to live with a constant ache in my chest where the mate bond used to pulse with warmth. The mark on my wrist never faded. It stayed black, a reminder of what had been stolen. But slowly, painfully, I learned to ignore it. I became someone new in those territories. Someone harder. Someone who didn't trust friendship or love or any of the pretty lies people told. I learned to fight dirty, to survive by my wits, to trust no one. But I also learned other things. Dark magic, blood magic, the kind of power that comes from pain and sacrifice. I learned from witches who lived in the shadows, from rogue wolves who'd been exiled for knowing too much. I learned how to spot every kind of enchantment, every type of curse. I learned how to break them. And I learned, finally, exactly how Cassia had done it. She'd used something called the Heartstone ritual, an ancient, forbidden magic that let you steal someone else's mate bond if you were willing to pay the price. The price was usually your humanity, a piece of your soul, and 7 years of your life. The ritual required the blood of the true mate, which explained why Cassia had insisted on a sisterhood ceremony, a month before the festival, where we'd cut our palms and mixed our blood. I'd thought it was a beautiful gesture of our friendship. I'd been such a fool. 7 years. That meant the bond between her and Marcus would start to fracture in 2 more years. The magic would unravel. He would remember everything. Every moment we'd shared, every promise we'd made, everything she'd stolen from him. But I wasn't interested in waiting 2 years. I'd spent 5 years preparing for this. I knew how to break a Heartstone bond, and I was going to do it during the one day when all magical bindings were vulnerable, the Coronation. Marcus's father had fallen ill. A wasting sickness that no healer could cure. I suspected Cassia had been poisoning him slowly, ensuring her path to power. He was stepping down and Marcus was about to become alpha. The coronation was set for the autumn equinox, when magical barriers were thinnest and the veil between worlds was gossamer thin. It was perfect. The ritual to break a Heartstone bond required 3 things: the blood of the true mate, a token of the original bond, and the words of unbinding spoken at the exact moment of the equinox. I had my blood. I had a lock of Marcus's hair from years ago, kept in a locket I'd never been able to throw away. And I'd memorized the words. I returned to the northern pack 1 week before the ceremony. I'd changed enough that most people didn't recognize me at first. My red hair was darker now, cut short and severe. My body was leaner, harder, marked with scars from fights and rituals. Carried myself differently. I was no longer Aurelia Corvina, the heartbroken girl. I was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. But my mother knew me the second she saw me. Aurelia! She crushed me in an embrace that smelled like home and hurt. We thought you were dead. There were rumors. We heard you'd gone to the Eastern Territories. No one survives there alone. I wasn't alone, I said. I had my rage to keep me company. She didn't ask where I'd been or what I'd learned. She just held my face in her hands and looked into my eyes. You're here for the coronation. I'm here to take back what's mine. My mother was a beta for a reason. She didn't flinch, didn't question. What do you need? Over the next week I prepared. I gathered the final components for the counter-ritual. Sage from the sacred grove, salt from the tears of a betrayed mate, my own, collected over 5 years, and silver dust made from melting down the jewelry Marcus had given me. I tracked Cassia's movements, learning her routines, her protections. And I discovered something that made my blood run cold. She was pregnant, 6 months along, hidden under careful magic and illusion spells. Heir. Marcus's heir. The child changed everything. If she gave birth before I broke the bond, that baby would tie her to Marcus forever. Not just through magic but through pack law and biology. The child of an alpha was sacred. No one could separate mother and child. She would be untouchable. Had one chance. The coronation day. I had to break the Heartstone bond before Marcus put the crown on his head, and before anyone discovered the pregnancy publicly. If I succeeded, the spell would shatter, and Marcus would remember everything. Our love, her betrayal, all of it. If I failed, I'd lose him forever. And Cassia would cement her position as Luna with an heir that no one could dispute. The coronation dawned cold and bright. The entire pack gathered in the great hall. Hundreds of wolves dressed in their finest, all there to witness their new alpha rise. I stood in the back, hooded and cloaked, just another face in the crowd. Marcus entered in ceremonial robes of deep purple and gold. And even after all these years, even after everything, seeing him hurt, he was more beautiful than I remembered. Stronger, with new scars on his face that I hadn't put there, hadn't kissed, hadn't learned the stories of. But there was something hollow in his eyes, something not quite right. The emptiness I'd seen at his wedding had deepened. He looked like a man going through the motions of life without actually living. Cassia walked beside him, radiant in a gown of silver and gold, her hand resting on her stomach, still flat to most eyes, but I could see the truth beneath the illusion. She was glowing with that particular magic that comes with carrying a child of power. She caught me looking and smiled. She knew I was here. Course she did. She'd probably been waiting for me to come back, had probably planned for this too. The ceremony began with the traditional elements. The priestess called for the sacred oils, the ancient vows, the crown of oak and iron that had been worn by alphas for 1,000 years. I waited, my hand on the small pouch at my belt that held everything I needed for the counter-ritual. The sun was moving toward its zenith. The equinox was minutes away. And then Cassia collapsed. One moment she was standing tall beside Marcus, the perfect image of a Luna to be, and the next she was on the ground, gasping, clutching her stomach. Marcus caught her, panic breaking through the fog in his eyes. Genuine panic, because whatever else the spell had done, it hadn't completely destroyed his capacity for basic compassion. "The baby," she whispered, loud enough for everyone in the great hall to hear. "Something's wrong with the baby. Marcus, help me. Please." The crowd erupted in chaos. Cries of shock at the revelation of the pregnancy mixed with concern for the unborn heir. Marcus was shouting for healers, his voice raw with fear. The priestess was calling for order, trying to regain control of the ceremony. And Cassia looked directly at me across the chaos, her eyes locking with mine, and mouthed, "Too late." She was forcing the birth. Right here, right now, before I could break the spell. She'd figured out what I was planning, and she was ensuring that child entered the world while the bond was still active. If that happened, I'd lose everything. All my preparation, all my pain, all my years in exile, would be for nothing. I pushed through the crowd, dropping my hood. People recognized me now, gasping, pointing. "That's Aurelia. She's alive. What is she doing here?" But I didn't care about their shock or their questions. I had to reach them. I had to complete the ritual before that child was born. "Aurelia!" Marcus's voice stopped me cold. He was staring at me, really staring, and for the first time in 5 years, there was something in his eyes beyond the emptiness. Recognition. Confusion. The beginning of remembering. What? He looked down at Cassia, then back at me. His hand went to his wrist, to the place where the mate mark should be. What's happening to me? My head. There are memories. But they don't make sense. The bond was already starting to crack under the pressure of the equinox. The stress, the chaos, the thinning of magic. It was all too much. The Heartstone couldn't hold against the combined force. Don't listen to her. Cassia screamed, dropping the pretense of labor pain for just a moment. She's here to destroy us. She's always been jealous of what we have. She's been obsessed with you for years, Marcus. She's dangerous. But Marcus wasn't looking at her anymore. He was staring at his wrist, where the mate mark was slowly, painfully reappearing. Silver light bleeding through the spell that had hidden it, like dawn breaking through darkness. You, he breathed, looking at me. It was always you. Aurelia, what did she do to me? Why can't I remember? There are 5 years missing, but I can see fragments. You and I. We were. I pulled the components from my pouch. Salt, sage, the lock of his hair, a drop of my own blood drawn fresh. I began the counter-ritual, speaking words in the old language that made the air shimmer and crack, that made reality itself seem to bend. Cassia tried to stop me, lunging forward despite her supposed labor, but my mother and 2 other pack members, loyal to me, not to the usurper, held her back. She screamed curses in languages that hurt to hear, revealing depths of dark knowledge that shocked even me. You can't do this, she shrieked. I paid the price. I sacrificed everything. He's mine. Mine. But the magic was already unraveling, threads of the Heartstone spell becoming visible as they snapped one by one. The air filled with the sound of breaking glass, though nothing physical was shattering. It was the spell itself coming apart. The Heartstone bond broke with a final catastrophic snap that knocked everyone in the hall back a step. Marcus gasped, his eyes going wide. And then he was falling to his knees as 5 years of stolen memories came flooding back all at once. Every moment we'd shared. Every kiss, every promise, every whispered word of love. Every plan we'd made for our future. And then the memories of losing it. Of the festival where everything changed, of his wedding to Cassia, of 5 years lived under a spell. It all came back simultaneously. And the look on his face was pure devastation. Aurelia. God's Aurelia, what did she do? What did I do? Tears were streaming down his face. I married her. I've been with her for 5 years. I didn't know. I didn't know it was all a lie. How could I not know? I wanted to go to him. Every fiber of my being wanted to run to my mate and tell him it wasn't his fault. But Cassia was screaming again, and this time it wasn't curses. It was real, agonizing pain. The baby was actually coming now. The stress of the broken spell had triggered genuine labor. The healers rushed forward, their training overriding the chaos. They surrounded Cassia, and the hall fell into a horrible, tense silence as they worked. They delivered the child in the great hall, right there on the coronation floor where a king was supposed to be crowned. Boy. Tiny, perfect, with a cap of dark hair like his father's. The healer held him up, checking him over with practiced efficiency, and then something strange happened. Something that would change everything one final time. The baby. This newborn infant who shouldn't even be able to focus his eyes yet, who should be crying and helpless, looked directly at me. Not randomly. Not by accident. His eyes, far too alert for a newborn, locked onto mine with impossible precision. He reached toward me with one small hand, fingers grasping at air. And then he spoke. Not baby sounds. Not the crying or cooing that newborns make. Clear words in a voice that was far too old, far too knowing for his tiny body. Mother! The hall went silent. Completely, utterly silent. Every eye turned to me. Marcus was staring. Cassia, pale and bleeding from the birth, had gone white as death. Every single person in that room had heard it. There was no mistaking what the child had said or who he'd said it to. The baby said it again, still reaching for me with that impossible awareness. Mother! Please. That's impossible, Cassia whispered, her voice breaking. He's mine. I carried him. I gave birth to him. He's my son. Marcus, he's our son. Tell her. Tell them all. But the priestess, ancient and powerful, who'd seen things in her long life that others couldn't imagine, stepped forward. She took the child from the healer with reverent care and brought him to me, moving as though compelled by something greater than her own will. The Heartstone ritual, the priestess said slowly, her voice carrying through the silent hall, requires a life sacrifice. Usually the caster sacrifices their own years. But sometimes desperate casters make a different bargain. They sacrifice something else. Something more precious. She looked at Cassia, and understanding dawned on her ancient face. You didn't just sacrifice your years, the priestess said. You sacrificed his soul. Cassia's face confirmed everything. Guilt, horror, and defiance warred across her features. You promised your unborn child's soul to the dark magic, I whispered, understanding flooding through me. In exchange for the mate bond. That's how you made it so powerful, so undetectable. You didn't just pay with your own life force. You paid with his. The priestess nodded gravely. But souls don't like being bartered. They have their own destiny, their own path. This child's soul belongs to the woman who was meant to be his mother. True mate. The one written in the stars and the old laws. She placed the baby in my arms, and the moment she did, something shifted in the universe. The infant stopped crying. He hadn't been crying much to begin with, but what fussing he'd been doing ceased entirely. He curled against my chest like he'd always belonged there, like he'd been waiting his whole short life for this moment. And I felt it, a connection immediate and undeniable. Not the mate bond, but something equally powerful. A mother's bond. Somehow, impossibly, this child that I hadn't carried, hadn't given birth to, was mine in every way that mattered. This is impossible, Cassia said again, but her voice was weak now, defeated. Biology doesn't work that way. Magic doesn't work that way. Dark magic works in dark ways, the priestess said. You bartered your child's soul for stolen love. The magic took what you offered, but souls seek their true home. This baby, biologically yours by blood, has a soul that belongs to her, because she was supposed to be his mother. In every timeline, every possibility where the bond hadn't been stolen, she was the one who would have carried Marcus's heir. The old woman's eyes were sad as she looked at Cassia. The magic tried to correct itself the only way it could. You created a child with your body, but his soul came from the destiny you stole. He's not fully yours and never will be. Marcus rose slowly, shakily. He looked at me, at the baby in my arms, at Cassia who was weeping on the floor. 5 years of false life were collapsing around him, and I could see him trying to process it all. The stolen time, the violation of his mind and will, the wife who'd never truly been his mate, and now this child who belonged to both of us and neither of us in the strangest of ways. Tell me how to fix this, he said, his voice raw. Tell me how to make any of this right, Aurelia. Because I can't. I don't know how to live with what I've done. What she made me do. I looked down at the baby. At little Cato, I would name him later after my grandfather, and felt something shift in my chest. Something I thought had died in the Eastern Territories was stirring back to life. The mate bond was roaring back to full strength now that the Heartstone was broken, stronger than ever, demanding I go to Marcus and complete what should have been completed 5 years ago. But it wasn't the same bond anymore. I wasn't the same person. Neither was he. You can't fix it, I said simply, honestly. What's broken can't be unbroken. What was stolen can't be unstolen. 5 years are gone, Marcus. For both of us. But maybe we can build something new from the ruins. The coronation continued after the healers took Cassia away, after the chaos settled into a new shape. Marcus was crowned Alpha. His first decree stunning everyone. Magical crimes would be investigated by unbiased outsiders from other packs. Truth-seers would be brought in to examine all major pack decisions from the past 5 years. And Cassia Valentina would face trial for her use of forbidden magic. She was exiled in the end. Not executed. Marcus couldn't bring himself to order that, perhaps because she was Cato's biological mother, or perhaps because despite everything, taking a life was a line he wouldn't cross. She would always be Cato's biological mother. That couldn't be erased. But she'd never hold him, never raise him, never see him grow into the man he would become. Marcus and I didn't fall back into what we'd been. Too much had happened. Too much had been lost. He'd been married to another woman for 5 years, had lived a life with her, had memories with her that were real to him even if they'd been manufactured. And I'd spent 5 years becoming someone he didn't know, learning magics he didn't understand, surviving in ways that had changed me fundamentally. But we tried. We took it slow. We learned each other again, like strangers who'd once been lovers trying to find their way back. We talked for hours, days, weeks. He told me about the 5 years under the spell, the emptiness he'd felt, the sense that something was always wrong but never knowing what. The dreams he'd had of a red-haired woman he couldn't quite remember. I told him about the Eastern Territories, about learning to survive, about the darkness I'd touched to gain the power to break his curse. And Cato, beautiful, impossible Cato, grew up knowing 2 mothers but calling only one of them home. On his first birthday, Marcus asked me to marry him under the same oak tree where we'd first confessed our love all those years ago. This time there was no glamour, no curse, no stolen magic. Just 2 people who'd been torn apart by betrayal and were choosing to come together again. "I don't deserve you," he said, and he was right. He didn't. But life wasn't about deserving. "But I choose you anyway," I replied, and that was the truth. I choose us. I choose this messy, complicated, broken thing we're trying to build. Because that's what love is after betrayal. It's not forgetting. It's not pretending it didn't happen. It's not erasing the scars or the pain. It's choosing to build something new from the ashes of what burned down. It's looking at the wreckage and saying, "We survived this, and we can survive anything." Cassia never stopped trying to reclaim what she'd lost. She sent letters for years, showed up at pack borders, and made claims to anyone who would listen. She argued that Cato was hers by blood, that I was keeping her son from her, that the pack had no right to separate a mother from her child. But Cato never wavered. Even as a child, he knew where he belonged. "My first mother gave me life," he told me when he was 7, after one of Cassia's attempts to contact him. "But you gave me love. That's the one that matters. That's the one I choose." People often ask me if I regret those 5 years I lost. If I wish I'd stayed and fought harder from the beginning. If I wish I'd found a way to break the curse sooner, to save those years. The truth is complicated, layered like the magic I learned in the Eastern Territories. Those 5 years shaped me into someone who couldn't be broken by pretty spells and false friends. They taught me that sometimes you have to walk through fire to find your strength, that sometimes you have to lose everything to understand what truly matters. And when I finally stood in that great hall and watched my mate's stolen memories return, I was ready for it. The girl I'd been at 23 would have crumbled under the weight of it all. The woman I'd become at 28 could carry the weight and keep walking. Marcus and I ruled the Northern Pack together for 30 years. We had 2 more children, daughters Livia and Julia, who never knew a world where their mother was second best, where strength was diminished by gender, where love could be stolen by dark magic. And Cato grew into a man who understood that sometimes the deepest magic isn't in spells or curses or rituals, but in the soul's stubborn insistence on finding its way home. On the day Cato was crowned Alpha, he asked both his mothers to stand with him. Cassia had been allowed to return by then, older and allegedly wiser. Her exile commuted after 25 years of apparent reformation. She stood on one side while I stood on the other. And when the priestess asked who would speak for the new Alpha's character, Cato turned to me. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying through the great hall, "taught me that love isn't about blood or magic or fate or destiny. It's about choice. Every single day she chose me. She chose us. She chose to forgive what couldn't be forgotten and build what seemed impossible. She took a child that wasn't hers by birth and made him hers by love. She's the reason I know how to be a good man, a good leader, a good alpha. There wasn't a dry eye in the hall. Even Cassia was crying, though whether from regret or grief or something else I couldn't tell. Later at the celebration, Cassia approached me. We hadn't spoken directly in years. She'd been kept at a distance, allowed to attend ceremonies but never to approach the family she'd tried to steal. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words she'd never said before, not sincerely. "For all of it. For what I did to you. Marcus. Cato. I was so consumed by jealousy and bitterness that I couldn't see how dark I'd become. Can't undo it. Can't give back what I took. But I am sorry." I looked at her. This woman who destroyed my life and inadvertently given me the strength to rebuild it into something better. She was older now, marked by years of exile and loneliness. The beauty that had been enhanced by glamours was gone, replaced by the reality of a hard life lived alone. "I know," I said. And I did. I could see the truth of it in her eyes, the genuine remorse. But remorse doesn't undo harm. We would never be friends again. Some betrayals cut too deep, sever too many ties, break too many pieces that can't be put back together. But we could exist in the same world at the same celebrations, for the sake of the boy, now man, who loved us both in different ways. That night, lying beside Marcus in our bed, his hand tracing the mate mark on my wrist that had never truly faded, I finally understood something. Cassia had stolen my mate, yes. She'd taken years I could never get back, memories I should have had, a life I should have lived. But she hadn't stolen my story. She just made it longer, darker, more complicated, more painful. And in the end, that made it mine in a way it never would have been otherwise. It made me who I was. Not a girl who'd had everything handed to her, but a woman who'd fought for every piece of happiness she'd claimed. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus murmured, his breath warm against my hair. "That I'd live it all again," I said. "Every painful moment, every year in exile, every dark spell I learned, every scar I earned, because they led here, to this moment, to us, whole and healed in a way we couldn't have been without breaking first." He pulled me closer and I felt the mate bond pulse with warmth, real, unbreakable, earned through struggle and choice. "I wouldn't," he whispered. "I'd save us both the pain if I could. I'd go back and see through her spell from the beginning. I'd choose you every time, in every timeline. But then we wouldn't be us. We'd be softer, weaker versions. We wouldn't know how strong we are." He kissed the top of my head, and I felt him smile against my hair. "Then I guess I'm grateful," he said, "for every single scar. Because they brought me back to you. The thing about betrayal is that it teaches you who you really are. When everything is stripped away, your love, your trust, your voice, your future, your very destiny, what's left is the core of you, the unbreakable part. And you get to decide if that core is made of glass or granite. Chose granite, chose steel, chose fire. And when my best friend stole my mate, I learned that what's truly mine can't be kept by stolen magic. It will always find its way back, even if the path is winding and dark and takes years to travel. Even if it takes 5 years of exile. Even if it takes a child's impossible first word. Even if it takes walking through fire and learning dark magic and becoming someone you never thought you'd be. The love that survives betrayal isn't the same love that existed before it. It's deeper, scarred, complicated. It's a love that knows the cost of losing itself and chooses to exist anyway. It's a love built on choice rather than fate, on determination rather than destiny. And maybe that's better. Maybe the loves we fight for are stronger than the ones that come easy. What would you have done in my place? Would you have fought? Would you have walked away? Would you have learned dark magic to break the curse? Or would you have let him go? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me the city you're watching from. I want to know I'm not alone in believing that some loves are worth the battle, worth the darkness, worth every scar. And if this story gripped you the way it gripped me to tell it, subscribe because you haven't heard the half of what I've learned about magic, mates, betrayal, and the fine line between justice and revenge. There are more stories where this came from, and trust me, they only get darker and more twisted. Some endings aren't happy, but they're real. And sometimes real is better than the fairy tale ever could have been. Because fairy tales don't teach you how to survive betrayal. But surviving betrayal teaches you how to live.